What if I tell you the what if I tell you your sense of morality, something we are very proud of, can be changed by a foul smell? It's not changed by as much by some kind of spiritual awakening or by some kind of, beautiful class or some experience you had. But on a day-to-day basis, how severely we judge an action morally depends on how disgusting your environment is, or how foul the smell is. You know what I mean? If you're in a dirty room, for example, does that lead you to make harsher moral judgments compared to when you're in a clean room? You know? And I am intrigued by morality. I am very intrigued by morality because it's almost like a fact, right? Some things are good, some things are bad, and then there are degrees to this intensity for how moral a thing is and how immoral a thing is, right? But what I find really cool is that you go to different cultures and the idea of morality kind of changes. Certain things are bad in certain places, morally reprehensible, and then other things are just fine and they are the norm. And so it does seem that the sense of good and bad is bound to be changed, it's bound to be malleable, and the intensity can be figured out. Like even when we grow up, certain actions can be very immoral to us, but then the same actions would make sense if like a case is made for them, and then we understand, okay, now we understand the condition of what's going on. And so when it comes to understanding the little bit of very brief history of what thinkers think of morality, it would simply be that we associate morality with reason, we associate morality with the ability to think. And this would mean like how Immanuel Kant came up with his categorical imperative, where the idea was, okay, you behave in such a way that if everybody in the world behaved that way, it would make the world a better place. So now you have to think, okay, how should I act so that if everybody acted like me, the world would be a better place, right? This sense of morality comes from a rational perspective. You would also look at like John Stuart Mill, who came up with the utilitarian idea that morality is something which should be have utility, जिस चीज के कुछ फायदे हो, right? Something which is practical, something that is good for society, right? Practically speaking, that is what is more moral than something which is not. But then, but then somebody like David Hume comes, and like here is a quote by him, right? Hume wrote that morality is determined by sentiment. It defines virtue to be whatever mental action or quality gives to a spectator the pleasant sentiment of approbation and vice the contrary. Now, this simply means that, that morality is determined by emotions. Morality is determined by affect. Affect is a different word for emotions. And virtue would simply be any kind of like mental action, that would be like any kind of mental thought that you had that brings a good emotion inside of you, that is considered to be moral. And if anything brings a bad emotion in you, that's going to be considered a vice, it's not going to be considered a virtue. So David Hume puts up this interesting idea that morality might be a feeling thing, it might not be a rational thing, it might not be a product of our thoughts, it might be a product of our feelings, right? And that blew my mind because I was like, okay, yeah, this makes more sense than the rational ideas on morality. Like, morality is not mostly a result of rationality. Morality just cannot be, because it's a very direct thing. Like, how often do we really think about an action before we feel it's good or bad? We just have this instinctual reaction at first where we already have the idea that, okay, this thing is just weird to me because it feels that way. And then we think of reasons of how that can be what it is. And the idea of morality being a emotional thing, morality being something that is related to feelings, is also, I mean, here in this paper is mentioned that it's Leon Kass, somebody who is a what is he? He's a bioethicist. And he believed that when we look at technological advancements, we should avoid judging them, जैसे कि cloning हो गया वगैरह वगैरह हो गया, we should stop judging them on the base of utility, to be like, okay, this thing seems practical, this thing seems useful, so it's moral. Pay attention to AI, for example, right? In the day and age of AI, if we try to look at it morality from a utility perspective, it's good. It's gonna be great. It's gonna ease up so much work. It's gonna provide so much new jobs, blah blah blah. But then, what about the trouble it's gonna bring? So when we start using reason to figure out morality, we get stuck because how will you make decision when something has both good and bad? How will morality fit there? Because if you're committing an action which is 60% moral but 40% immoral, then what is that action by itself, right? According to utilitarian grounds. And so thinking of morality from a utilitarian perspective seems to not give us an accurate answer. And it also makes us confused about how we should act in our life, right? Because knowledge should have a tendency to become embodied. And by embodied, I mean knowledge should not just be in our thoughts and feelings, but it should be in our action. It should be just in our behavior, right? And so when we are looking at morality, the sense of good and bad, from a utility perspective, it's gonna be very difficult to embody that. And also, like if you embodied certain actions, you're just gonna judge yourself based on the 40% immorality in your actions. Because we are bound to pay attention to the negative, right? We are not we are not we don't it's not easier to focus on the positive or pleasant than it is to pay attention to the unpleasant. That's just how human beings are, because we have to survive. Because we have to survive. And that is the case. And so I came across this paper, which is beautiful. This paper is absolutely beautiful. It's written by four people. I think I will give their names because this is such a great paper. It's like a novel, to be honest. It's like a beautiful, beautiful novel. And so, yeah, Simon Schnall, Jonathan Haidt, Gerald Clore, and Alexander Jordan, they came up with this beautiful idea, and they based it on, I think, Jonathan Haidt's model of morality. Now, what is, Jonathan Haidt's model of morality? It's called the social intuitionistic model of moral judgment, right? And what does that mean? It means that, or it claims that moral judgment is a result of a quick gut feeling. Morality is a judgment, moral judgment is a result of a quick gut feeling. And it's very similar to, written on the paper, it's very similar to aesthetic judgment. It's very similar to, okay, this thing looks beautiful, right? It reminds me of this Nietzsche's quote where Nietzsche said that killing a butterfly is immoral and killing a cockroach is okay because morality has aesthetic criteria. Does seem to be right. It does seem to be right, but then why is a cockroach disgusting and a butterfly isn't, right? This is what is answered in this paper. And so, like, if we are looking at as morality as a creation, yeah, फिर morality as a sense that exists as a feeling, right? Moral feelings, right? Because it's not related to thoughts as much, or at least in the genesis of it, it is not related to thoughts much. But if we look at morality as feeling, and we know that moral judgment is a thing, let's ask one question to ourselves: how much, how much of our judgment is manipulated or played with by our emotions, right? Now, there was this great paper, and in that paper, they found that, which something which is obvious, it was that when you ask people when they are in a great mood, how would they rate their lives, they would rate it to be better. And then compared to when they are in a bad mood, this just simply shows that our judgment is heavily driven by our emotional states. And so when it comes to moral judgments, you would you would think that, okay, yeah, it would also be the same. And so, it's written here: affective processes influence judgments and evaluations, has also been systematically investigated within the affect as information framework. Affect as information framework, what does this mean? Affect as information. Affect means emotion. So emotions as information about the world. Judgment about the world, right? Because what is a judgment if not like analysis of information? And so when it comes to affect as information model, definitely we have found in the scientific literature that it is true. The way we rate, the way we judge our lives, others' lives, and everything depends on the current state, mental, emotional state that you have. And so, you know, the idea that Jonathan Haidt, who came up with the social intuitionistic model, claimed that its morality is based on a gut feeling. And what is a gut feeling really? What is a gut feeling if you really pay attention to it? They suggest it might be disgust. घिन की वजह से maybe morality आई है, And what does that mean really? Like now, because it came to disgust, we have to also talk about like a little brief history of disgust and how, like, what do we think and why is disgust there and why did disgust evolve pretty much. And so we were omnivorous animals, and back in the day, right? Back in the golden days, we were omnivorous animals, and disgust developed in us so that we could protect ourselves against poisonous berries. तो जैसे कि if किसी चीज में जहर है, right? That thing would just be looked upon as disgusting because it like killed some of our ancestors, and then we would avoid eating that shit. That is how disgust developed. It developed as a protective mechanism so that we don't consume things that are bad for us, or we don't hang around places that are bad for us. If some place has a lot of bacteria infections, right, it starts to smell bad. Why does it smell bad? A more specific question is, why do we perceive it as it is smelling bad? Because we want to stay away from that, right? It has bacteria. It has bad things there that smell bad and they repel us. And so disgust is a protective mechanism, and it developed as a protective mechanism so that human beings can survive better, right? And so what does disgust indicate, right? Disgust indicates that a substance either should be avoided or if ingested should be expelled. And so जब आपको घिन आती है, right, your stomach growls, right, you want to vomit. It's a very gut thing. It's not a brain thing. It's a very gut thing. And 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 disgust, think about this. Disgust developed as a mechanism to protect ourselves against poisonous berries or infectious places. And if we have ingested them, there was an instinct कि अच्छा ठीक है, आपने अभी उस चीज को खा लिया है जो poisonous है, तो आप उसको बाहर भी निकालो, right? So it advanced a little bit. Now, I think Haidt, Rosen, Macaulay, and Imada in 1997 did a research where they showed, and it's written here, so I'll just read it out. Across many cultures, the words and facial expressions used to reject physically disgusting things are also used to reject certain kinds of socially inappropriate people and behaviors. Now, really think about it, right? If there is a foul smell around, people make a particular facial expression because we use our face to communicate, we use our eyes to communicate. People use the same facial expressions when it comes to something which is physically disgusting. Or if we see an action and we feel physically disgusted by it, we will have the same reaction. What is that facial expression really, right? We close our eyes, right? It would be, what else? We just like shake our heads. Just there would be a thing in our eyes that would show that, yeah, we are disgusted by this thing. And and this other thing, feelings of disgust can be transferred to objects for which they are, irrelevant. I mean, this also happens. It's like other emotions, right? You have, for example, if you have a neutral mood, then if you have a neutral mood, you will be willing to spend more money compared to if you were made to feel disgusted right before you were about to spend money. It just causes an effect onto that. It just causes effect into other actions that might not even be connected to disgust. It just does. And this shows that this instinct of disgust can be transferred into the social realm, right? It's not just only about, oh, I don't want to ingest this, but it is also about how it leaks into the social realm, how it leaks into communication, because we want to communicate to other people as well. Ki, oh, this thing is disgusting, don't go near that. We want to do that. And so disgust went from being a protective mechanism to protect us against berries and infectious things, and it moved towards us being able to communicate that, hey, this thing is disgusting. There is also this idea about gossips, right? There's a beautiful idea that gossip is the basis for social structures. Why? Because gossip helps us to figure out what is disgusting and what isn't. It's just a very complicated basis of things being out. Like, why do we love to gossip? Because we like to talk shit. Why do we like to talk shit? Evolutionarily speaking, we talk about things we find disgusting or some things that like interest us. It would be like, okay, we want to relay this information to somebody just so that the social structure can survive, just so that we would have better chances of surviving and avoiding people who are bad. So, gossip, right? It's also connected to disgust. That's what I think. That's my thing. And then you look at, okay, so the thing is now definitely right there. There's also a paper that established and divided disgust into three domains of disgust. It was contamination disgust, sexual, and moral disgust. These three are very important things. These three things guide a lot of things, because contamination is not simply about physical contamination, because human beings are not just physical beings, but it is also about mental contamination. It's also about identity contamination. It's also about, if some disgusting person is around you, somebody who's psychologically disgusting, it repels you. Why? Contamination. So then, in a different paper, Wheatley and Hyde, in 2005, what they tried to do was they tried to hypnotize people and give them a suggestion कि some type of arbitrary words will be connected to feeling a flash of disgust. Now, these arbitrary words were words that do not incite any disgust. So it would be words like often, words like take. And what they found was when people were given like couple situations to rate how morally bad those things are, what they found was wherever the word associated with that flash of disgust was present, people regarded that thing to be more morally reprehensible and morally bad compared to when those words were absent. What's crazy, what's crazy is that where the words did exist, these suggested words did exist, but there was nothing that was morally bad in those statements. People rated those things as somewhat morally reprehensible, even though they could not think of any reason to back up thinking that those things are morally bad. So they were condemning something which simply had these words that they were hypnotized to feel disgust towards, and that made them rate a thing without any transgression, any bad showcase of morality, to rate them higher and condemn those things. This simply opens up a Pandora's box. It simply opens up us to this idea that our morality is not very stable. Morality is very shaky, and the reason morality is shaky is because it's heavily influenced by emotions and affect, and especially then the idea of disgust. And so in this series of trying to discuss how disgust can affect morality and more or less led to the creation of it or to the creation of the sense of it, there are certain things that we need to keep in mind because it's a very interesting paper. One thing is that, okay, if disgust leads to morality or if disgust leads to level of morality or intensity of morality, then what does this say about people who are aware of their bodily functions, aware of their body sensations, more than people who are not? So there are people who are well aware of what's happening in their body, what temperature their body is experiencing, and then also there are people who are not so aware of those things. So how is disgust gonna showcase in these two type of people? Also, if disgust is not the only instinct or emotion that leads to more severe moral condemnation, but also if some other emotion, like in this paper they used sadness to try to see if more sadness also leads to
more radical moral condemnation of actions. So this paper is really beautiful. So the next video is going to be discussing four experiments that this paper did, that involved in this paper, and this is what they wanted to find. Okay, the first thing is, are all moral judgments influenced by disgust, or only those that contain actions involving physical disgust? Okay. Second one is, are other non-moral judgment also affected by disgust? So this would be कि अच्छा ठीक है, if you are presented with, if you are put in a condition where things are disgusting, where there is a smelly, if you're put in a smelly room or if you're put in a clean room, is that going to cause any difference in what you view, for example, socio-political environment to be like? So does disgust really go and generalize into other aspects of opinions and judgments, or only with moral judgment? That's how they try to separate moral judgment from other types of judgments. The third thing is the effect driven by emotional feelings or activated concepts of disgust. So in like three papers, the discussion is simple. कि अच्छा ठीक है, people who are more aware of their bodily sensations, will they be more likely to be in control of disgust when it comes to making moral judgments compared to those who are not aware of their own body? Okay. Fourth one is gonna be any other negative emotion. So it would be अच्छा ठीक है, maybe disgust is not the only emotion, but can we study some other emotion that leads to more severe moral judgment? So that's going to be discussed on the next one. Four experiments, they are really amazing. And I think they also answer or try to answer the question if we should base morality on our intuition. Because it simply seems that morality cannot be based on rationality. It just cannot be. Rationality is like a tool to the instinct. So when we make up excuses or reasons for one thing to be more moral than the other, the morality is already established, and it's not as influenced by rationality than it is by instincts, especially disgust.